Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another bonus edition of the Missing Links podcast. Every once in a while, I get myself lucky enough to where I have an actual guest that wants to come on and talk basketball. And today we have the voice of the Minnesota Lynx, Sloane Martin. How's it going?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day here in San Jose, not San Francisco, in case people forgot. But we'll see if the Lynx are going to wrap things up just in 2 games or if we'll be back at Target Center sooner rather than later.
Yeah, be honest, was it a little disappointing having to go to San Jose instead of San Francisco and not being able to play or watch them play at Chase Center?
That's a good question because you want to be a team at their best and not have there be any other, excuse or other circumstances that could affect this. Of course, Golden State, setting the attendance record, which is great. Having been in that building 2 times, it is a difference maker. It's great. And even Cheryl has said, how great for that area and that region to finally have a long awaited WNBA team and they are showing out. Now, I'm curious. I feel like it still is going to be quite a strong home court advantage.
Yeah.
I have nothing to base this on except for that I'm from Southern California and people are just used to driving long areas or like long distances. So maybe, usual fans, whether you're in the East Bay or San Francisco, wherever fans are kind of coming from, that's my inkling, but maybe it could be the opposite because we're talking about, I have to literally check what day it is. We're talking about a weekday. We are talking about, drive time and just other factors that could be. But I think Minnesota should be preparing that this could be the same raucous atmosphere, even if it's not a Chase Center.
Well, and where the Sharks play in San Jose, which the arena is escaping me, but they
center. Got to get that into my head. Yeah.
Okay. What's the capacity there? Is it like a pretty good sized, like 15,000 or
that's not always the details.
Oh, if you don't know, it's just fine.
We assume it's going to be on par with, a Chase Center or Target Center in terms of being a men's major professional sport arena.
Oh, for sure.
So
yeah,
I
think that's fair.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on it because, Golden State, I think towards the end of the season, a lot of people were just kind of worried of like what the Lynx headset or kind of headspace would be on. They were 6-5 to close the year, injuries. I kind of chalked it up to they hadn't really had to play a meaningful game of basketball since July. And at some point you're going to slip off a little bit when other teams are fighting for their playoff lives. But what were your kind of general takeaways from that game one, kind of dismantling the Lynx gave Golden State?
Well, I thought that was a statement. And for the exact reason that you're talking about is that Lynx, for a long time, they locked up number 1 before we even got to September. It felt like a purgatory in a kind of way where it's like, yes, we have goals, but we're also trying to, rest some players and think about minutes and trying to balance all these different things. And they weren't 100%. It was just kind of a weird and maybe even a little bit of an awkward time for the Lynx. And I thought to come out and have this dominant, this decisive of a victory against a team that does play extremely hard and has such a set identity, even though they're without their 2 veteran players. They have never made that an excuse this season either. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the first 3 games of the regular season had been much more competitive, where Minnesota needed some kind of run or burst in the second half, where there was one quarter where things kind of got away from them a little bit and they had to really battle back, whether it was at Target Center or at Chase Center. Now, the last 2 obviously have been certainly more one-sided, significantly so in that playoff game. But I thought for people who may have been questioning the last couple of games and what's going on here, are they as sharp as they should be? This was a resounding statement, I thought, to say, like, this is who we are and we're that team.
It was shocking watching it. We were both there. One, Lynx fans, you guys are incredible. The amount of noise that was in that building is. And
I still saw many pink wigs too. I credit the people who are going to be holding on to that. I expect to see them in the semifinals and then up to the finals as well.
We're going to be seeing them next year, the same pink wigs. But loudness aside, I wrote on it last week of just kind of who are the Valkyries, right? And they have the number 3 defense. They are the best paint defense team in the league. They allow the least amount of paint points, lowest field goal percentage allowed in the league. They don't turn the ball over a ton. They're this really kind of disciplined team that prides themselves on being really, really good at certain aspects on defense. And then on offense, even the people from the Golden State media I was talking to were like, yeah, they kind of just chuck it and hope that they get hot some games because they don't have the penetration. And the Lynx just kind of, I doubt it was Cheryl's game plan to go directly into their strength and just kind of, I mean, kind of ram it down their throat of like, oh, we're gonna just score inside because that's what you're good at, and we're making this a statement. But I mean, they scored 44 points in the paint. They seemingly broke their zone defense within about 3 or 4 plays, causing the Valkyries to just throw it aside. And on offense, they really didn't have anything going. Veronica Burton had 7 turnovers. It seemed, sitting in the press conference after the game, it just seemed like, what on earth can this Golden State team even do to fight back? Which I mean, I'll be honest. I recorded after the game with Kenzo Fukada, a Golden State Warriors and Valkyries reporter, and he was kind of in the same loss of like, yeah, I don't know what they do to even get a game this series. What's your thought on that? Do you think there is a path that they can get a game other than just like a historic shooting performance where everything's going in? Or do you feel like this one's kind of just the Lynx, as long as they take care of business, it's going to be a 2-game series?
Yeah, that's you bring up really good points there, Andrew. And it's hard to, divert yourself from that exact thinking where it's like this one team is just so much stronger in a lot of categories. And that's not to take anything away from Golden State. In fact, I don't think it's empty words or just, performative for Nafisa Collier or Cheryl Reeve to talk about how hard this team battles and how we're not overlooking them. And in my one-on-one interview with Cheryl that I get every game, and shameless plug for my broadcast too, I'm on the road, the local broadcast. If you don't want to watch the national TV, or you can do both, mute it. Sorry for the digression.
I'll be honest. I usually end up muting games and just listening to Sloane for road games. So I have recommended that to quite a few people that get frustrated with the national broadcast.
Appreciate that very much.
Sloane's a good way to get information.
Oh, thank you. I try. But it seems like there's just such a gap there. And what I was saying was, I don't think that it's just empty words. What Coach Reeve, what Fee has said about what they expect from this team. I mean, Cheryl told me in that interview where she said they were 1 game away from being the 6th seed, that we do not take that for granted, of how talented they are. And I thought Natalie Nakase and her kind of mentality too, where she said, all right, they did their job at home and now we're going to do our job at home too. And I think that is a difference going from a 2-1 format to a 1-1-1, because there were a couple blowouts, including this one, on day 1 of the WNBA playoffs. And could that change the dynamic here? And I think that's a really interesting thing to see for basically the first time here, that we're not at Target Center, that we're in San Jose. So I think that that's something you can't overlook either. Do I think Minnesota will move on after 2 games? I think that would be rational and logical to say so. I know, and this is something that I do bring up when it comes to this matchup, and hilariously it is in the Golden State notes, but I have not immediate insight, but I was coached by Natalie Nakase when I was 16 or 17 years old in Southern California. She was my AAU coach. And, the things that we remember about her is that she is 5'2" generously. She walked on at UCLA, which for us was a dream to do, became a starter on that team, and was someone who pushed us extremely hard and held us to a high standard. And I thought was a really great coach to have in my life at that time. At that age where you have another woman who's tough on you and holding you to a high standard and challenging you. And it seems like she is the exact same coach in so many ways. And I think back to what Cheryl has said at different times, saying this is a well-coached team, someone who could be, the WNBA Coach of the Year, AP Coach of the Year. So I think you can't overlook that either. But when we look at what the Valkyries are missing, the fact that this is now 5 games of data that we have where the Valkyries have been shooting 25% from 3. And you bring that up too in those conversations with Valkyries reporters. And I've had that same sense too, hearing from Natalie Nakase, where she was asked about that. You lead the league in 3-point attempts, but you're in the bottom when it comes to efficiency. And she more or less said we don't care, that we're going to hang our hats on
Yeah.
defense, and that's the number one thing that we care about. So I think that something that stood out to me that was, and you mentioned this too, is scoring in the paint for Minnesota. I just thought being able to remove that superhero strength that the Valkyries had leading the WNBA in opponent points in the paint, just 29 and putting up 44, that felt like a statement itself. So if you're the Valkyries, what do you even do there? They still shot double-digit threes on you, and they pummeled you in the paint, and what that dilemma is. And I don't know how you overcome that.
I will second everything you said about Natalie Nakase. The respect she has from like the Golden State media. I mean, everyone I spoke to had nothing but high things to say about her, that she's like instantly endeared herself to the entire like city of San Francisco as well. I thought was like, good on you. Cause you know, it's hard to just go in and just instantly get yourself over with a new fan base, but she seems to have done that.
No, for sure. And like, she is someone who has grinded to get here. Like, I think about half a lifetime ago, plus a couple of years. I mean, there was max D3 players, 3 D3 players on our team. And then she grinded it out in the NBA, got herself on, you know, Becky Hammond's staff. So this is someone who, you know, is really embracing this opportunity, and just, you know, she's motivated. I mean, she's a fiery kind of person. We saw her get teed up, and we saw her with, you know, a pretty strong reaction to the post-game press conference as well. This is a very competitive person.
It also says a lot that, I mean, expansion teams, they are what they are, right? Like there's kind of, I feel like it's kind of dismissive when they say it's a bunch of just 6 players on a roster that came together, because like Veronica Burton has proved that she is starting caliber. Like there's something there. Thornton has proved that. Chechi, I think, could start for many teams in this league just because of her all-around skills. So I don't feel like it's just a bunch of bench players that have like mighty ducked it to the playoffs, but it does say something that she has been able to figure out how to get this team to play so hard for each other, and to kind of defy all the odds and make the playoffs. Because if you would have told me like 4 months ago that they would be a game away from the 6th seed and the 8th seed with a winning record, I would have thought something had to have gone wrong for that to happen, or like they traded for Alyssa Thomas.
Right. I mean, that's why there's a tennis tournament. That's why we're here right now, because no one thought that this would be happening, that this was, you know, possible and within reach. A winning season, going to the playoffs, a nearly top 6 finish that is top half in the WNBA this season. I mean, that is really remarkable. And that's why I said all these things that players and coaches around the Lynx have said about Golden State, I think is genuine about, you know, I think mutual respect that is there too. And if there's 2 things I would distill to Cheryl Reeves' just coaching philosophy of her entire career, it is unselfishness and playing hard. And I think Golden State meets those 2 things in terms of how they also want to move the basketball. And Coach Nakase said the same thing, where she said, I feel like there's a lot of parallels between these 2 teams and how we want to move the basketball, the pride we take in defense too. So I think that there's, you know, obviously there's a gap here, what we've seen, especially the last 2 games closing out the regular season, and of course game 1, but really intriguing when you look at Golden State overall.
It wasn't lost on me that when they had the expansion draft and everyone they picked, and I'm not going to like sit here and name names saying like, oh, this is a player that I wouldn't want in my locker room, because I just feel like that's probably not appropriate. But like everyone they picked, I kind of went like, oh, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good locker room person, good presence. Yeah. And then the next pick would happen to be like, yeah, all right. That makes sense. Another good locker room, good presence.
Or like, leadership. Oh, he's gritty. She's a grinder. Like, okay, yeah. I can see what we're putting together. And even Cheryl brought this up before the last game, where she was like, this roster was highly criticized. Like, people really doubted how many wins this team could ever accumulate. And then picking 5th overall, which makes me very curious about what this next expansion draft is going to look like. I mean, you're exactly right, where there were a lot of questions, and Cheryl acknowledged that, of like, but look what they did.
Yeah. It just the parallel in roster building where Cheryl kind of does the same thing where, when you're
Yeah.
looking a couple years ago and they sign Alana Smith, it's kind of like, all right, she's maybe not the best center in the league, but like seems like a cool person, good person, plays hard. And now she might be winning defensive player. Kind of same with Courtney Williams, where, I think there was a case to be made that Natasha Cloud could have been brought here, or just bringing Natisha Heidemann in was kind of enough to quell that point guard role. But she brings in Courtney, and it's kind of like, yeah, all right, that makes sense. Kind of plays hard, seems like a good person. And I think that goes a lot farther than maybe us in the media talk about, of just having 12 to 15 good humans on a bench. Yeah, Sloane, I'm going to... Oh, what's that?
Oh, I said those good people who also hustle their behinds off. That's another ingredient. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Sloane, we first have to do a mini Sloane appreciation show here. As Minya says, appreciate your work, Sloane.
Thank you.
Mitch says Sloane's the GOAT. And Ben drops in, says the
you.
one and only Sloane Martin, truly one of the best in the business. So we did have to pause a little bit for a Sloane renaissance here, because
Wow. Well, thank
I
you
can
to
say
those
I
folks.
appreciate your work, but also some other people do.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate folks who have tuned in the entire season long, but like, that's what's so exciting about the playoffs, is like, this is also like the reward too for everybody who's been tuning in and like amped up. And it's like being right here, so I appreciate it.
We made it. Sloane, I do want to ask you about Natalie Nakase's kind of post-game comments. First, I'm going to throw us over to a quick ad, though. Well, hello. Thank you, Livestream Andrew. This is Ad Read Andrew. And today we have Firehawk Construction and Remodeling, the presenting sponsor for the Missing Lynx podcast. Firehawk Construction and Remodeling strives to inspire people to follow their ideas, working with respect and understanding to create a quality, tailored result. Firehawk Construction and Remodeling, located in Blaine and serving in the North Metro area, is here to help you with your building and remodeling needs. I can say personally, thanks to Firehawk Construction and Remodeling, I have a beautiful deck in my backyard, and countless projects that I started, they finished. Get started on your new deck or remodel today by calling Isaac at 763-710-5686.
Good job there.
And if you don't like calling people on the phone, like my beloved wife, who would rather die than call somebody on the phone, Firehawk does have a website now where you can submit kind of ideas, questions for quotes and emails back. So you can now do that virtually as well, firehawkconstruction.com. Okay, Sloane. So Natalie Nakase comes out of the game, and I think everyone in the post-game media room tried to give her multiple opportunities to walk back what she said a little bit. She kind of came out right away and said, the refs were killing our momentum, killing our groove. She mentioned a quick, like, back-to-back offensive rebounding foul. One of the Golden State writers followed up and said, like, so, like, what about the refs? And Natalie kind of doubled down a little bit more and said, like, we just want a fair fight. Like, we want a officiating thing that's fair for both teams throughout the entire game. Another Golden State media member asked, like, what do you mean by a fair fight? Like, where did you feel it was unfair? Natalie kind of responded to that saying, like, it's not the amount of fouls, it's when they're called. And a lot of the fouls that she was feeling were being called were kind of at very inopportune times for them. A little bit more background. We did ask Cheryl when she got into the post-game presser, and she, to summarize, she said, the officiating was weird. Coming out of halftime, Cheryl kind of joked that she went up to the refs and are like, what the heck did you guys talk about? Because this is not how the officiating was in the first half. So I do think, there's probably something to say about the officiating, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, Andrew, because sometimes my approach as a broadcaster, I wouldn't call it ambivalence, but I'm stating what's happening. And this is like an objectionable fact that this is the whistle, this is what happened. On paper, and I'm glad that you went through that and really parsed through what both coaches said, because sometimes it is incredibly
We were
hard.
really trying to give her a chance, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I told you she's
continue.
fiery.
Continue.
But I understand how frustrating it is when, especially on an effort play, you get called for a foul. I think it's also frustrating when, a bigger player gets called for an illegal screen against a smaller player, and want to get a second look at that too, and how sometimes that can line up and just be frustrating on both sides. And on paper, it's hard because the Lynx shot just 3 more free throws. Sorry, they shot 3 fewer free throws. It was 27 to 24. And clearly, sometimes it's hard to have this conversation, I think, within the context of this specific game, because there were 51 total fouls. There were a lot, and they were quite evenly split. So I understand the distinction that she is making about momentum killing, but I just don't know if that's what you can chalk things up in this, a game when you were down by as many as 36 points. So, and I understand why she's going into that. She talked about officiating Natalie Nakase actually coming into this series, where she said in that game, the 4th game of the season, to close out the regular season, she said, we were whistled for 6 offensive fouls. So we're trying to understand how to best play against this specific team and what that means for us, what adjustments we need to make. So this is clearly had already been on her mind, even coming into this series. So I know that that's just not a firm response either way. I feel like in some ways I'm like the observer and the teller of what's going on, but it is a lot of fouls that happen in that game, no doubt about it.
It felt like an NBA game, and that is the biggest critique I can give. The NBA has way too many fouls. One of my favorite things about the WNBA is they let them play, sometimes too much. But poor Terry Horseman, the gentleman that gets to sit next to me from the 9, I multiple times said, like, they must not want to wait at the airport for their flights out of here, because they're like killing this game with penalties. I felt the same way. I mean, I can look at it and say, they called 2 quick fouls on Alana Smith in the first quarter. She went to the bench with 6 minutes left. You can look and say they called 2 illegal screen plays on Fee within 2 minutes in the third quarter. Yeah. She went to the bench. I'm not going to like disagree with Natalie and say that the officiating was like great. That being said, I do think it was bad fairly equally for both teams. I didn't feel like there was this, massive one way or the other advantage by the calls. It just seemed like it kind of sucked for both of them, which I think that's why Natalie ended up getting the technical. I mean, like you said, obviously it was something that maybe was on her mind coming into it. And when it's already on your mind and then it just kind of compiles, it doesn't help things.
Now it'll be interesting to see if or how things might adjust in game 2, and how each coaches just kind of have to go with that kind of flow, if it is different or not. Or like Cheryl said, these are 2 very physical teams, so maybe we're going to see just a lot of whistles.
I think I just have a feeling we're going to have a lot of whistles in game 2, and if there is a game 3 as well, because like you said, they're very physical, and unfortunately, like, that physicality is going to cost you fouls sometimes. And it'll be interesting to see if they make that kind of switch mid-game again, though, because I did feel like there was kind of they let him play pretty well the first quarter and a half, or maybe not the first quarter and a half, but especially the first 6 minutes and then the entire second quarter. And then it just kind of switched, where all of a sudden you're getting these moving screens called and offensive rebound fouls and just kind of weird, a off ball clear path transition take foul, which I can say I have not seen that before. But that's enough hammering on the refs. As Nate Pence here says, Golden State's was just kind of outplayed. I do feel like, because it's building up in the chat again, we have to take another Sloane appreciation break, where Little Bit says, love Sloane insight, need her on more. Rodney sends Sloane calls a great game. And Andrew says, I thought we had one more great little Sloane thing. Well, we have 2 Sloane things. I was going to wait for 3. I got what I get from our chat is that live stream Andrew is great, and ad read Andrew has some serious skeletons in his closet. So thank you, David. I appreciate that. Sloane, I want to ask you a couple more things before I let you go here. Just, you've been around the team all year. I feel like both of us probably, after witnessing that first game, feel pretty comfortable that this team is locked in again and really pushing for a deep run. Looking ahead, yes, there's a game left, or a game or 2 left, but kind of looking ahead, how do you feel like the playoff bracket kind of laid out for the Lynx, where, they're either going to be getting the Mercury or Liberty in round 2, and then I would assume Atlanta or Vegas in the championship, although Indiana, right before we started recording, pulled off the upset and beat Atlanta and Indiana. So that's going for game 3.
Oh, so that's what I mean, because that was decisive victory for the Dream, and then you go to someone else's house. That is very interesting. I had not checked up on that since we got here. When you look at the playoff bracket right now, it's extremely interesting. So looking at the New York Liberty, I just most recently, and correct me if you saw anything more up to date, but Sandy Brondello talked about Brianna Stewart's injury and said that her imaging was relatively clean, but still is a game time decision. And that seems, just from the outside, that could be potentially iffy is what it's looking like right now. That's significant for the New York Liberty. And that was a team that I felt like kind of drifted off toward the end of the season. They did not look like the reigning champions at most times, or a team that was hungry to be, back-to-back champions. And of course, they have been ravaged by injuries. They may have had, along with Indiana, the most starting lineups in the WNBA this season. So that's certainly a factor in how things have gone. But I think that they just did not nearly look as sharp as you would have expected looking at what this roster is. Now, when you look at Phoenix on the other side, and I don't really see a lot of people talk about Nate Tibbetts, but from my perspective, I think that he's done a really strong job in building this team, also with a lot of injury issues, of course. And even though Minnesota was able to overcome her and a really great Connecticut Sun team last year, Alyssa Thomas is not really someone I think you choose to face in the playoffs. That is, and this was, of course, with all due respect, she is one of the greatest players on the planet, an MVP candidate in her own right, but she is a scary competitor, and someone who, and this is something I say every broadcast because it has stood out to me for so long, but I remember a couple of years ago, Cheryl Reeve talking about Alyssa Thomas. I remember it was Cheryl who brought in Thomas to USA Basketball. She had really not been in that ecosystem throughout her career, and she brings her in for the World Cup, then of course the Paris Olympics, because of the respect that she has for her. And she said, no one plays the game smarter than her, harder than her. And I thought that sums it up right there. She's had, I believe, 4 triple doubles against the Minnesota Lynx. Now that goes back into what I view as another era of Lynx basketball before 2024, but still shows just the competitor that she is. And I feel like Phoenix has clicked a lot better in terms of their execution, their defense, as well, as opposed to the Liberty, when you look at how that might match up with the Lynx potentially in the semifinals.
I like that you brought up Tibbetts, because I agree with you. I mean, you look at a year ago, he had Diana Taurasi, Brittany Griner, and Tasha Cloud as kind of his big 3, none of which are with the team. And he's kind of just pieced together this team on the fly and has gotten them to work. And it's because of Alyssa Thomas. I mean, she is essentially playing point guard out of the paint on most of these possessions, which is not something a lot of WNBA teams go to. I mean, it's been fascinating. I guess, the Liberty, it's interesting because you're right. They've been injured all season. I feel like if there was proof that they sold their soul for the championship, maybe this is it, that all of these injuries just keep happening over and over again this season. The other side of it is just how many times do we see it in basketball where you have this super team, but they're not playing a lot of games together. I mean, Jones and Stewart haven't played a ton together. Sabrina's been in and out and has missed time. Emma still has only played like 2 actual games with Brianna Stewart. It's hard to see a path for them if Stewie's injured now, because I don't know what that team even looks like. How do you feel like between, I mean, again, the Dream lose tonight, but I think they'll still be heavily favored. The Aces, you got to imagine, would be heavily favored as well. How do you feel that series, if it goes into the Western Conference, or I guess they don't have Western and Eastern if it goes into the semifinals,
the other semifinal
plays out?
So you're talking about if we see Vegas and Atlanta?
Yeah.
God, that's a very interesting one, because I still feel like even with a 16, is it now, game win streak?
You're gonna say what I feel every time I look at their record, so continue.
It still is quite shocking to me. I mean, and it's interesting / just coincidental and funny how the Lynx have played a role in all of this. So it was that 30-something point loss where Jewel Lloyd went 0 for 10 and had 0 points. She goes to the bench. That helped uplift them. And then, of course, the 53-point victory. And that completely changed the entire season. But I think Melissa Smith has been an incredibly underrated impact player for them. So maybe she's only averaging, 10 and 5, but I think her presence is supremely important for the Las Vegas Aces. And this is even it goes without saying, just the tear, the heater that Asia Wilson has been on to try and uplift this team. Clearly over this stretch, a lot of numbers of unreal games, including against Minnesota. What was it? Was it 11 for 14 or 11 for 15? Just games like that, over and over again. But to see how they have transformed is still kind of shocking, still something I have to wrap my head around, frankly, based on the games I saw them, play against this top-ranked Minnesota team, where they were just frankly outclassed in several of those games. So, but they are clearly a team that is catching your attention. But Atlanta is also a team that is very intriguing in a dangerous way for the Minnesota Lynx as well, where they won 2 games this season. I think they're another team like Minnesota where they are unselfish. I have long thought that Alicia Gray is one of the most underrated players in the WNBA. She has always been efficient. She's always been versatile. She's always, to me, been a two-way player and someone who just goes about her business, and that doesn't get recognized enough. And I think that their length, I remember something also Cheryl Reeves said to me, where she said Brianna Jones just wakes up and gets out of bed and she's ready to offensive rebound. I mean, she's a game changer in the way that she is able to get on the glass. She is also, I think, one of the most underrated players in the WNBA. And it's not just looking at win shares, but take a gander at that, and that will show you at least somewhat of a peak of the kind of impact she's capable of having. So this is a long way of saying, I don't know, Andrew. I think both of those teams can be dangerous in their own respective ways, and they are different ways, and a very tough matchup, I think, even for Minnesota, who went 2-2 against Atlanta, who only lost 1 game to the Las Vegas Aces. This current version of the Las Vegas Aces, the first 500, or the good one, 500, totally different. But I see them as being both really quite challenging when you do look ahead in that way.
Yeah, it's been very hard for me to get the Aces. I mean, they were 14-14 before they went on this kind of ridiculous run of 16 straight, and it's hard for me to forget that they were a 500 team not that long ago. And because of that, I feel like I don't feel as though I'm like dismissing them, but I feel like I'm not giving them their due, because Asia has been phenomenal. They have gotten something really going there, but like it's just so hard for me to forget that this team for 2/3 of the season wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. And then Atlanta, everything you said, I completely agree with. The only thing I would add is teams that are really good at offensive rebounding and that shoot a ton of threes scare me with this Lynx team, because this Lynx team, just long rebound seems to be one of their Achilles heels. Those, somebody early in the shot clock just launches a 3. It just seems like And I will say I do anticipate it getting better because a lot of those rebounds comes down to guard play and guard rebounding. And when you have nothing to really play for 11, 15 games, you're not probably going to be rebounding as hard as people that do have something to play for. But it's just that 3-point variance in Atlanta's offensive rebounding ability just scares me a little bit more than any of the other teams, I would say. Sloane, I'm going to throw us over to point. Oh, continue.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's a very fair point and something that is, but the other thing I will say too about Atlanta is that's maybe been, and I know Minnesota didn't win that series, but maybe the most fun series this season, just close games and tough battles and just fun matchups, I think, overall.
We get angry K-Mac in Atlanta games usually, which is always like one of my favorite versions of K-Mac when she's
Can I just say too
upset, which I feel bad because I really like K-Mac, but
yeah. Let me just say too that one of my favorite moments this season was, I think it was that first game in Atlanta, the one that went to overtime, where it is Ryan Howard versus K-Mac one-on-one. She is out on an island tie game, one of the great scorers in the WNBA, and K-Mac made that stop. And I was like, how cool is that moment? I still remember it. I replayed it in my head for so long after that. But I thought that was just a really awesome moment.
Yeah. Angry K-Mac always shows up against Atlanta. There must be some beef there that maybe if they get into the finals, I can badger her enough to figure out what it is, but it's my favorite version of her. Sloane, I'm going to throw us to one more ad. And then last thing I wanted to ask you, I prepped you for it a little bit, but I just want to hear what are your favorite stories from covering this Lynx team? Because, if I consider my access of 40 to 50%, I get to be around the team, see the team, watch the games, talk to people. You're there all the time. So I'd love to hear your stories. But first, we do got to hear about Nate Pence. And we're back with another ad read. This time for Pence Homes, the presenting sponsor of Hitting the Hardwood Network. From the best tools and technology to transparency throughout the entire process, Nate Pence and the Pence Homes team is the top choice for buyers, sellers, and is proud to support you and your home ownership goals. Get started today by calling 612-308-1122 or by emailing info@pencehomes.com. Alrighty, Sloane, the floor is yours. I am just curious, what have been your favorite moments covering this team so far?
Okay, so first of all, this is a hard one to answer, Andrew, because I can't just be spilling everything here that I'm here all the time. I respect the access that I get, that away from the team. And actually, it's WNBA rules that you can't take videos on the plane or anything else. So I don't mean
to be so don't get fired. Don't get fired. We don't want you to lose your job.
Which means that there's really not a lot. I will say, I think something that really stands out to me is just seeing, them off the court as much as I do. The family that's around them or friends who come and travel to see them at different arenas and just seeing the connections that they have, because there is so much sacrifice, especially for those players who do play year round and play overseas, and finding those opportunities to see their loved ones, see people around. I think also just conversations with coaches too is one of my favorite aspects of this team. I get to pick the brain of Cheryl Reeve before every game. And sometimes, she is a chess grandmaster and I'm a 500 ELO. Shout out to anyone who understands that and is a chess nerd like me. But it's one of my favorite things about this season, the relationships that I have with the assistant coaching staff as well. So I don't mean to be a party pooper and not really bring anything specific here to the table, but it really is because it's just this is, a regular part of my job and something that, it's just internal. But I would like I said, those times away from the court, being just in the hallway as they're getting wow, sorry about that. I have this, by the way, I have my computer on top of some kind of coffee accoutrement thing here.
Ooh.
So little slid around a bit. But like seeing them just in the hallway after games, or like standing behind them in line to get food, and like little conversations that you have and stuff like that. So I think being able to have those moments to be and feel really embedded with this team has been such a difference maker. I mean, also just doing games away off a TV screen is, let's just say, less than ideal, and that's what the situation is. So for me to be here in person is something I do not take for granted. Not just like those extra little moments where you feel like you're trusted, is that's really
Mm-hmm.
important to me. But also just like to see funny little things that happen behind the scenes.
I'll completely agree with you on that. That probably is my favorite part too, of just like as the season goes on, even though I don't have your access, building little inside jokes with players and kind of having those relationships. If I had to say my favorite thing through covering this season, it's probably been just the amount of coverage I've been able to bring, showing Cheryl Reeve in a different light. Because anytime there's a clip of hers that goes somewhat successful on social media, I will get literal DMs of like, I didn't know she was funny. And it is kind of shocking that like she has this kind of, Greg Popovich type of persona where she's just this curmudgeon-y coach. But then when I get to see her and talk to her, I'm asking her if she'll dye her hair pink and like having more actual conversations with her. And I think that's been one of my favorite things this year, is just putting more Cheryl content into the world and seeing, even if it's just through DMs, the public perception of Cheryl Reeve change a little. Because I mean, I talk to Olivia, the Lynx's PR person, all the time of like, she could do stand up in a different light.
Yeah, if
Like,
only things had gone differently for her. But
I know.
that's a really good point, Andrew, and hats off to you, like the times that you've gone there for sure. But I think, Cheryl is also different. She said as much too. And her players, I still
Yeah.
remember asking Kayla McBride about her, Coach of the Year candidacy. And, her and Courtney have talked about how it's just different the way it is right now. Courtney was like, they told me that, since we've gotten here, it's
Yeah.
been different kind, of Coach Reeves. So I think that is a really interesting progression and journey for her too, especially we should point out that last game, becoming the winningest coach when you combine regular season and postseason wins too. Just significant milestone for her, one of the greatest coaches of all time. But it's funny that you bring up Popovich, because it is the exterior, it is the gravitas that she possesses.
Mm-hmm.
See her as she's kind of the de facto spokesperson for not just the WNBA and women's basketball, but so many things. We talk about societal issues. I mean, unfortunately, this season, and I don't want to end on a down note here, but I thought about over the years the number of times I have sat and watched Cheryl so eloquently, thoughtfully, just discuss awful tragedies that have happened.
Yeah.
And the way that she's able to do that with so much reassurance and trustworthiness, and using her voice in this community that's been her home. So that, I think, is, that's always been a staple of hers. But you're right. I don't know. I'm glad. I'm going to jot that down, remembering that conversation that we had. And she said, without even a beat or a breath, when we win a championship.
Didn't wait at all. I
Oh,
mean, she's had other ones where she's so sarcastic, which I appreciate a lot. The other thing that's interesting is I joined this beat last year too, same time Courtney Williams did. Honestly, like Courtney got signed, and then I think I got told I was getting Lynx credentials like maybe a week later. But talking to some of the people that were on the beat longer, they kind of say the same thing. It's like, oh, this is a different Cheryl nowadays. And I'm just kind of sitting here like, I don't know, like this is the only Cheryl I've really known. So she seems cool, but it is interesting how people progress as they get further into their career. And yeah, it's been really cool to see the different side of her and the internet kind of change a little bit to being a little more pro Cheryl, because everyone needs more Cheryl Reeve in their life.
Who would not? I mean, also, like, I know you talk, like, obviously her personality, and I talk about my one-on-one chats with her, but there are
Hmm.
times where I'm just enthralled hearing from a basketball savant and one of the greatest of all
Yeah.
time. Just the amount that I have learned from her is just remarkable.
I still remember a few months ago, I was just, Fee, or it was about a month ago, Fee was out injured, and I was just kind of talking about like, how would you guard this team when they get into their pick and roll and like that stuff? And Cheryl's like going into how she would double like the down screen and come from the corner. And then she's like, yeah, but I guess then like, Bridget and Lan and all of them would be open. So I'd probably do this. And then she just kind of like ended saying like, yeah, we put him in a tough spot with like her little grin. And it's just like, yeah, you do, Cheryl. You've assembled the Avengers of WNBA here. Like, it's interesting to see her thought process the few times I've gotten to see it too. But Sloane, that's all I had for at least the podcast version of this. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say before we end it here?
Well, thank you for that. I feel like, because I have to direct people to my Instagram. I'm definitely there more than Twitter. I feel like that's maybe self-explanatory. But it's underscore Sloane Martin, Sloane with an E. And also just tuning to the broadcast. I appreciate it so much. It is just me working solo, but with just kind of the depth of knowledge that I have about this team and this league. Really excited to just like how I can jam pack as much in there as possible. And I appreciate everybody who's tuned in or said nice words or continues to follow along for the stretch of the season.
It's finally time where all of our questions will be answered. Sloane, thank you so much for hopping on here. I appreciate you so much. And to the 395 people that have swung through here tonight, you're why we're doing it. Lynx fans deserve content. I'll frame it as Terry does. We will provide the content. It's up to you to decide if it's good or not. But until tomorrow night, I'll be back on the live stream after the game ends.